Phrase cancel culture gets thrown around a lot these days, pretty loosely at times. Celebrities like J.K. Rowling, Morgan Wallen, Will Smith all had to contend with online outcry after they themselves expressed something publicly. They didn't get canceled and they've been free to make a living, but whether it's simply accountability or censorship, there's undeniably a new kind of toxic outrage in our digital public square.
Conservative journalist Rikki Schlott takes a closer look at the phenomenon in a new book she co-authored, The Canceling of the American Mind. Cancel culture undermines trust, destroys institutions, and threatens us all, but there is a solution. Rikki joins us now live. Good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Rikki, when did this all start? Was it just all tied to social media, or was there something that turned commenting on people's posts into canceling people?
Well, there's certainly been a long history of censorship in this country reaching back to its earliest days, including, I think, probably most notably the Red Scare, in which we had tons of professors fired for what should have been protected speech. But we definitely argue in our book, which I co-authored with Greg Lukianoff, that cancel culture in its current form, in terms of the actual cultural shift towards tearing people down, really started in 2014 and accelerated in 2017. And we strongly believe that that's tied to the fact that social media really allows for piles on of people in a way that just word of mouth historically had not. And people can go viral, just an everyday person in a span of seconds, if they say or do something that rubs people the wrong way.
And it's not only saying or doing something on social media. Even if you like a controversial post, you could be canceled. You write that today's cancel culture focuses on the morality of the speaker rather than the merit and validity of his or her ideas. Tell us more about that.
Absolutely. I mean, we think cancel culture is part of a larger dysfunction in the way that we argue in this country, where rather than actually engaging with people's viewpoints and responding to them in an intellectual way, so often today we really attack people and go ad hominem at them as a person, and whether it's degrading them for their political beliefs, for dismissing them based on their race or their gender, or even just dismissing something that I've noticed as someone more on the right, is that a lot of my fellow conservatives are very reflexively dismissive of expertise or of people who claim to be experts in any way, shape, or form. So there's a whole host on both the right and the left of dysfunctional ways that we argue that allow us to kind of win arguments by attacking people without actually winning arguments by attacking their ideas.
Let's look at some of the examples we have in celebrity culture. Will Smith, famously after the slap at the Oscars with Chris Rock, canceled. You know, and we have J.K. Rowling, Morgan Wallen, all things that happened with them. What causes someone to be canceled, and then is it passage of time that allows that to stop?
You know, I think typically going viral is the most instantaneous way that people get canceled. But I think it's so easy to get caught up in these very large, flashy celebrity examples where often, I mean, these are successful people who can land on their feet and fall back on their reputation. However, I think it's really important to note that there are countless more everyday Americans who don't actually make headlines, but who get torn down, doxxed, threatened, maligned. Their employers get contacted. And we have countless examples in our book, including 1,000 attempts just since in the past decade of getting professors fired, 200 of which were successful. And one of them, unfortunately, my co-author's friend, was canceled for a tweet that he sent in 2020 and ultimately took his own life as a result. So I think it's really important to remember that, yes, of course, these are interesting headlines to observe, but the everyday American could themselves also be canceled.
Talk to us about some of the solutions that you explore.
Absolutely. We advocate strongly for a free speech culture in response to cancel culture, which requires that everyone really buy into the old idioms that I think most Americans were raised with, to each their own. This is a free country. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I think, unfortunately, the world has really shifted away from those values that underpin a pluralistic democracy where we can have productive conversations with one another. And I can say, as a 23-year-old myself, my co-author is of a different generation. We're decades apart in age, but it's a really marked difference and shift in terms of how I was raised. None of those values were really inculcated in my generation. And so I think we really need to very mindfully restore the principles of free speech and classical liberalism and start engaging with people's ideas. Because if we want to solve the most contentious issues in society, that's really going to require actually having productive conversations and not just attacking each other.
Well, the book is called The Canceling of the American Mind. For more, you can check out RickiSchlatt.com or follow her on social media. Ricki, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.